Ever get that feeling that things aren't always uh, quite as straightforward as they seem, especially, in the crypto world?
Oh, absolutely. Things move fast, and there's always something brewing under the surface.
Well, today we're plunging into a potentially, let's say, thorny debate happening right inside the Bitcoin community,
Yeah,
specifically about Bitcoin Core.
exactly. We got this really compelling piece from Matthew Katz, Bitcoin University. It's called, "Is Bitcoin Core Going Rogue?"
Okay, going rogue, that definitely makes you sit up and listen.
It does. And the article really digs into some, well, fascinating undercurrents, tensions between the people actually building and maintaining the Bitcoin network.
So, for this deep dive, what are we actually trying to figure out here? What's the goal?
Right. So our mission really is to pull out the crucial insights from this article for you. We want to cut through the noise, help you understand the different viewpoints on Bitcoin development, its governance, which is pretty unique, and why decentralization is just so fundamental, the absolute bedrock. We want to do this without getting totally bogged down in super technical stuff. Just get you up to speed on a really vital conversation that's happening right now.
Sounds good. Important stuff. The article focuses on Bitcoin Core. So maybe for listeners who are a bit newer to Bitcoin, what exactly is Bitcoin Core? Why should they care?
Good question. Think of Bitcoin Core as like the main blueprint. It's the reference software for the Bitcoin protocol itself.
Okay.
It's what most people use if they decide, hey, I want to run my own full Bitcoin node,
And running a node. Remind us why that matters.
because it puts you in charge. You get to verify every single Bitcoin transaction yourself, make sure everyone playing the game is following the rules, the consensus rules. You're not trusting anyone else's word for it.
So it's like being your own independent auditor for the whole Bitcoin system.
Precisely. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And importantly, Bitcoin Core has this direct lineage. It traces right back to Satoshi Nakamoto's original code. That gives it a lot of, well, historical weight in the community.
Okay.
Now, it's really crucial to understand the difference here between running a node, which is about verification, relatively lightweight, and Bitcoin mining.
Right. Mining is the heavy lifting, creating new blocks.
Exactly. Super resource intensive, creating new blocks, adding them to the blockchain. You don't need like a giant warehouse full of special hardware just to run a node and see the truth for yourself. Verification is accessible.
Gotcha. Now, the article also mentions another name, Bitcoin Knots. Where does that fit into this picture?
Yeah, Bitcoin Knots. It's another type of full node software. It essentially speaks the same Bitcoin language. It's compatible with Bitcoin Core.
An alternative, then.
An alternative, yeah. It might have slightly different features, maybe a slightly different development philosophy behind it. But the key thing the article points out is its usage is pretty small compared to Core. We're talking around maybe 2.5% of nodes. Bitcoin Core is definitely the dominant one.
Okay, so core is the big fish. Now, that phrase going rogue, it kind of suggests the developers might have a huge amount of unilateral power. Does the article clarify who actually, calls the shots in Bitcoin development?
It does. And this is a really critical distinction. The article stresses this. Bitcoin Core developers do not control Bitcoin.
Ah,
Think of them more like highly skilled contributors. They propose changes, sure, but ultimately they work for the people running the nodes, the users. So it's different from, say, Ethereum.
very different. The article contrasts it with Ethereum, where someone like Vitalik Buterin has, arguably much more central influence on the protocol's direction. Bitcoin's setup is designed to be different.
Interesting. So it's more like the users have the final say? Is that fair? That's exactly the idea. Bitcoin's governance, if you can call it that, is built on community consensus. If the core developers suggest an update, a change to the protocol, it doesn't just automatically happen.
Right.
Every single person running a node gets to choose. Do I adopt this update? Or do I stick with the software I'm currently running? This power to essentially veto changes by just not upgrading, by running different software. That's a cornerstone of Bitcoin's decentralized nature.
That sounds like a pretty powerful check on the developers, actually. The power really rests with the everyday users running these nodes.
It really does. And the article highlights how this gives you, the user, significant leverage. If a proposed change starts to feel like it threatens Bitcoin's core principles, maybe its role as sound money or its decentralized structure, node operators can collectively push back just by refusing to adopt the change.
Okay, so understanding those mechanics. Let's get to the heart of the controversy. What are these censorship allegations the article brings up?
Right. So the spark for this particular flare-up was the banning of a community member known online as Bitcoin Mechanic.
Okay.
Now, this isn't just some random person. Bitcoin Mechanic is the CTO at Ocean Mining, a pretty respected voice in the technical community. The article says this ban happened after he started asking questions about a specific proposed code change, and importantly, its potential connection to Jameson Lopp.
Jameson Law, yeah, big name in the Bitcoin space. What's the alleged connection here?
The connection involves a company called Citra, and Jameson Lopp reportedly has a financial interest in Citra.
Okay.
Now, Citra is apparently working on integrating what the article calls Ethereum-style features into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Specifically things like an EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, and that has set off some alarm bells for many in the community.
Why the concern? I mean, Ethereum has smart contracts, lots of applications. Wouldn't adding some of that functionality potentially be good for Bitcoin?
That's the crux of the debate. The core worry, expressed in the article and by many, let's call them Bitcoin purists, is that adding this kind of complexity could undermine Bitcoin's original purpose.
Which is?
To be a simple, robust, decentralized digital money. There's a very strong belief that adding too many features, especially complex ones like an EVM, could introduce new security risks, bloat the system, and just distract from that fundamental monetary goal.
The article also mentioned some past actions by Citra that worried people.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Apparently, Citra was involved in something called spamming the UTXO set.
UTXO set. That's basically the list of spendable Bitcoin, right?
Exactly. The ledger of all currently available Bitcoin outputs. Spamming it means creating loads and loads of tiny, essentially useless transactions. The effect is it increases the storage space and the processing power needed by everyone running a full node. So many node operators saw that as, well, a harmful practice. Annoying at best, potentially damaging at worst.
And Bitcoin Mechanic got caught up how? What were his specific worries?
He was questioning this proposed code change, the one potentially linked to Lopp and the Citra. And crucially, he raised the flag about a potential conflict of interest.
Because of Lopp's financial stake.
Right. Given Lopp's financial interest in Citra and his apparent support for changes that could benefit Citra's goals, Mechanic felt it was vital to scrutinize the motivations behind these specific code proposals. His ban from the GitHub repository, where these discussions happen, after raising these concerns, well, that just poured fuel on the fire about open source moderation. His dissent being silenced.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a big deal in the open source world. Open discussion is usually seen as paramount, isn't it?
Absolutely. It hits at fundamental questions. Who gets to decide what's acceptable discussion? Where's the line? Especially for a project like Bitcoin, which is so decentralized and, frankly, financially significant. It's a sensitive area.
Okay, let's maybe drill down into the technical weeds a bit. The article talks about ARP return and changing its data limits. What's the significance there?
Okay, yeah. The core technical issue revolves around something called a pull request, or a PR, basically a proposed code change. This one was submitted by a well-known Bitcoin developer, Peter Todd. And his PR suggests changing the rules around the op return field in Bitcoin transactions.
Op return, right? That's the little space in a transaction where you can stick some non-money data, like people have put messages, Bible verses, that kind of thing.
Exactly that. It allows for embedding a small amount of arbitrary data. Think of it like a tiny digital sticky note attached to a transaction.
Yeah.
Over the years, sort of an informal agreement, a consensus formed to limit this data to about 80 bytes.
Why the limit?
It was seen as a pragmatic compromise. Allow these niche uses, timestamping, metadata, but don't let people stuff huge amounts of non-financial data onto the blockchain because that burdens the network. It makes the blockchain bigger for everyone, forever. So 80 bytes was this sort of sensible limit to prevent bloat.
Okay, so Peter Todd's proposal. What's he trying to change about that?
His PR proposes removing that 80-byte cap, just getting rid of it altogether.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay.
Which would, theoretically, allow people to embed significantly larger chunks of data directly into Bitcoin transactions.
Right. I can immediately see why that might raise some eyebrows. What are the potential downsides the article points out?
Several big ones. First, spam. Without a limit, it could open the floodgates for people to just dump loads of irrelevant, maybe even malicious data onto the blockchain, much easier than before.
Okay.
Second, it could really encourage the development of more complex, maybe Ethereum-like data applications on Bitcoin. This ties back to the Citra concerns, potentially shifting Bitcoin away from just being sound money. And third, just the basic scalability question. If the blockchain starts filling up with huge amounts of non-transactional data, what does that do to the cost and ease of running a node long-term?
And there's another layer to this proposal that seemed particularly contentious in the article. It wasn't just removing the limit itself.
That's absolutely critical, yes. Peter Todd's PR also proposes removing the ability for individual node operators to set this op-return limit themselves.
Ah, okay. So take away user control.
Exactly. Right now, you could potentially configure your node software to say, I don't want to deal with op-return data larger than X bytes. This change would apparently remove that option. It would be a protocol level change that everyone has to accept or risk falling off consensus. This part really worries people who champion user autonomy and the ability to run your node according to your own rules within reason.
So it's not just a technical tweak. It really digs into that fundamental idea of who decides how your Bitcoin software actually runs.
Precisely. And this whole technical debate around op-return limits, it really serves as a perfect illustration of a much deeper philosophical split within the Bitcoin community about where it should be going.
The article framed this as traditionalists versus progressives. Can you sketch out those two viewpoints for us?
Sure. So the traditionalists, and the article uses Bitcoin mechanic as an example here, they generally prioritize Bitcoin's main job as being monetary first, sound digital money. They tend to favor keeping the core software simple and robust. They want strong defenses against network spam. They believe control needs to stay decentralized with individual miners and especially node operators. And when it comes to op-return, they see keeping those limits strict as crucial for efficiency and maintaining that monetary focus.
Okay, makes sense. And the other side, the progressives, like Lop and Todd, according to the article, what's their vision?
The progressives, as characterized in the piece, seem to believe Bitcoin has the potential for more, that it can support a wider range of applications beyond just being digital cash. They seem more open to exploring innovations, maybe things inspired by Ethereum. They might favor protocol-level upgrades designed to enable new things, and they could see expanding op-return, for example, as a way to encourage that growth, attract more developers, more applications onto Bitcoin.
So it really boils down to a fundamental disagreement about what Bitcoin is and what it should become.
Yes, exactly. Is it primarily a highly resilient, scalable monetary system that needs protecting? Or is it a base layer ripe for building all sorts of new things on top, even if that means more complexity and potential trade-offs? That's the tension.
Okay. So reflecting on this whole discussion, what are the key sort of educational takeaways the article really wants us to remember?
It hammers home several really vital points. First, node sovereignty. The idea that each individual Bitcoin node operator having control is the absolute foundation of the network's decentralization. Can't stress that enough.
Right.
Second, it reinforces that software maintainers, even for Bitcoin Core, aren't protocol rulers. They propose, but the network is opt-in. It's user-driven. The power ultimately lies with those running the software.
That ability to choose which software you run feels absolutely key.
It is. The article also really highlights the need for transparency and, frankly, tolerance for dissent in how these open source projects, especially in DeFi, are managed on platforms like GitHub. And finally, it stresses just how important it is to scrutinize incentives. Look for potential conflicts of interest, especially when code changes seem to align neatly with specific business goals. Always ask cui bono, who benefits?
Good points. So bringing it all together, what's the article's final verdict? Is Bitcoin Core actually going rogue, in the author's opinion?
The conclusion isn't quite a simple yes or no. The article suggests that while maybe gone rogue is too strong, there are definitely significant concerns, worrisome trends that need watching closely.
Such as?
Concerns around transparency in some decisions, maybe a drift towards more centralized influence where dissenting views get pushed aside, and this push towards introducing features that feel, to some, more Ethereum-like than Bitcoin-like.
So the overall message is one of cautious vigilance. Be aware.
Precisely. The article's argument is basically that actively defending Bitcoin's foundational principles, its neutrality, its minimalist approach, its primary role as sound money is crucial. It's necessary to prevent the network from drifting away from that original vision.
Okay, this has been a really insightful deep dive. Definitely clarifies a critical debate happening right now. To sort of wrap things up, what are the main tensions, the big philosophical questions we should maybe keep mulling over?
Yeah, I think the core tension is clear. Preserving Bitcoin's identity as this unique, decentralized, sound money versus the pull of innovation and adding more features. The op-return debate, the GitHub moderation issue, they're just symptoms of this deeper conflict. And it really forces us, and you, the listener, to think about the long-term consequences of any change to the protocol. and ultimately who really gets to decide Bitcoin's future.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, as we finish this deep dive. Think about that balance, innovation versus preservation. Where should Bitcoin land on that spectrum? Who truly controls a decentralized network like this? And what role does your own participation, maybe even deciding to run your own node, play in safeguarding its future? Definitely something to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.